Hello, welcome to the day 3 video for the Hibiscus Swimsuit sew along. Today we're doing our straps. So we're finishing the binding on our neckline on the front and on the back, as well as sewing the straps that we will use to tie the swimsuit together. This will apply no matter what options or view that you've chosen for your swimsuit. So let's go ahead and get started. So now our suit should be finished for the main. All we have left is to finish the elastic on our bottoms and to do straps for the top. So the first strap we're gonna do is we're gonna finish our front neckline right here. So it's going to be the top 2 lines on the chart. So it'll be the front neckline binding cut 1. So it'll be 1.5 inches that's going along the with the greatest stretch. And then I'm doing the one that's 9 inches, and then your elastic will be the same length. So you want to cut out elastic for that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the binding right sides facing on the top of the suit, and we're going to just base that on. I like to base this part with a stretch stitch. And then after we base that on, we're going to go right back over it and then sew the elastic onto the top of the neckline. Okay, so when you're sewing this on, you're gonna have to stretch the binding just slightly. It's not gonna be a major stretch, but you are gonna wanna stretch it slightly to fit this neckline. And it says to baste on this, but I usually don't because I don't really wanna remove the stitches, so I'm actually just using my serger. You could also do a zigzag stitch on this part. And I'm not trimming any of it off, even though it's only sewing with a 1/4 inch. Because my elastic that I'm using is 3/8 inch, so it'll create the 3/8 inch seam allowance that I need. And it's a really slight stretch on this. It's not a big stretch. So this is where you should be at this point. You're only sewing on one side of it. You're not doing both sides like you would on a band. And now we're gonna take our elastic. I'm gonna move over to my regular machine and then just sew the elastic on with a zigzag stitch. Right now you should have your elastic on top of your binding, and I'm just going to flip this binding over to the wrong side to sandwich my elastic as well as to sandwich the back. So you're just gonna have a raw edge hanging off on this back, and then you'll have a finished edge on your front. When I'm done, I'll go back and remove the basting stitches when I initially had basted this part together. And now you want to use either your cover stitch or you can use just a zigzag on your sewing machine. Just make sure you change the thread to a color that you think is going to match really well with your binding, because this part will be visible. So it's fine that I used just white thread and it doesn't match on the inside because no one's ever going to see that, but they will see whatever thread you use on your top stitching. Okay, so now you are going to want to trim away any off of the back that is hanging over. This will be the case especially if you've used only a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, like if you use 1/4 inch elastic. But if you've used 3/8 of an inch, then you shouldn't have any that you're trimming, but you will have a little to trim if you use 1/4 inch elastic. Okay, so this is our finished front binding. Now that we have finished our front neckline binding, we're going to turn our suit over and we're going to do the exact same thing on the back binding. So the only difference is that when you do your back binding is that you want, see how my front binding is nice and clean and straight right here. Well, the back binding, I want it to hang off by 2 inches because we need those 2 inches because they're going to create a loop for us to be able to put our straps through. So you want to mark the center of your back and then the center of your binding so that you know how much you need to stretch, because you are going to have to ease it in. And then I'm going to measure what the 2 inches is and then put a clip there. So you'll want to overhang that and then make sure you've got 2 extra inches to work with. And put a clip here. And this is right sides together. I'll do it on the other side. I'm going to go apply this right sides together And this is just my overhang. You're just gonna let that hang off. You don't need to really sew on it or do anything with it. You're just gonna sew on the suit, right sides together with the stretch stitch, attaching this binding. And you see how it's not exactly the same, so I'm gonna have to stretch, not the suit, but just stretch the binding to where it fits that size. So now I have my back binding attached. So you can see I had a white serger thread and it's just one single layer, and there's my back, and here's my 2-inch overhang where it's just the binding is just draping off. And now we're going to put on our elastic. So the elastic does not need to overhang. When you're sewing the elastic, you are going to sew it on the binding side, but you're going to start where your suit would start. So you're going to need to kind of look and see where that is, and then put a clip where that starts. So you're still just going to have this binding just hanging off, not doing anything. And then you're going to stretch the elastic. You want to mark your center point so you kind of know how much to stretch it. And then you're going to end at the same point on the other side. See where it's even with the suit. And then our elastic, we're going to put it on with just a zigzag stitch over the binding, just the same way we did on the front. So it's going to need to be stretched to fit here. And then we're going to wrap it and stitch it down the same way we did on the front as well. Okay, so I have my back binding, the binding on, as well as my elastic is on the binding side. And now I am going to flip this over, flip the binding to cover the elastic. So just flip it over the elastic and then shove it under to where it's on the wrong side. And there's just a single layer on the wrong side. I'm not folding under in any way. And I'm gonna top stitch this. And when I top stitch it, whenever I top stitch the loop, I mean the overhang part right here, it's gonna look like this. And I'm gonna kind of try and make it a little narrower. So this is like 3/8 inch wide. I'm gonna make this a quarter to an maybe even a little less. And then whenever I go to trim it, I'm just gonna trim this excess afterwards. So I'm gonna top stitch all along this back binding. So I have my back binding top stitched down. Here is what it looks like on the wrong side. I don't know if you can see, I used the matching thread, so it might not be as obvious. And then I have my 2 inches that are overhanging. And then you see how I have that little excess. So I'm just gonna get some scissors and trim. I don't wanna trim any of the suit. So you're just gonna trim any of the binding that is hanging past where you have top stitched. So now we should have our front binding done and our back binding done, and we're going to cut out our underarm binding. So the underarm binding is going to be the longest of all of them. This one is 38 inches for the biggest size, and we're going to take that. It's 1.5 inches on the width, and the length goes with the stretchiest part. And we're going to put it right sides together like this. And you want to start along the back, and you're going to have it overhang 3/8 of an inch. So just like this. So you have your on the back side. So on the back, you'll have 2 inches overhanging on the back binding, but the underarm on the back is going to overhang 3/8 of an inch. And then you're just going to put this on here, right sides together. You'll want to stretch it a little bit, just minor stretch along here. And then we're going to apply it to our underarms. And you'll want to start on the back on both times, because you need that only 3/8 of an inch of an overhang there, while on the front you're going to have a very big overhang. So whenever I apply this, I'm going to stop right here. So I'm going to sew it with a stretch stitch and just sew it all along on the underarm on both sides. Okay, so now I have just the binding applied to the underarms, right sides together. And now I'm going to cut out the elastic. On the chart, it'll say underarm strap elastic cut 2. So on the biggest size, it is 9.5 inches. So I cut 9.5 inches, and I'm not going to sew it from the overhang. I don't want anything hanging off. I'm only going to sew it onto the suit, but I'm sewing it on the binding side, not on the suit side. So it's going to need to stretch. So I'll sew it on, I'll just make a clip so I can note where each end is. So I'll clip here, and then I'll clip to the end here. And then I'll just sew this on with a zigzag. So you notice that's about how much stretch I'm going to need to get it on here. Okay, so I'll attach that with a zigzag, and then we'll do the binding just the exact same way that we did on the other, we'll want to top stitch it down the same. But before we top stitch it, I'll have to show you how to do this part as well as to make the straps on this part. So this is the front that has the straps overhanging. So this is the area we're working on. This right here is your back binding that has the 2-inch overhang. And then this is your underarm binding. So you're going to want to take your underarm binding and then just fold the 3/8 inch overhang this way. So it's like this, and it encloses that. Then you're going to take this one and you're just going to fold it over like this. Then you'll wrap this binding over it like this. And now everything is enclosed. I want to put a clip over that, and I'll show you again on the other one. So that is the way this side of the back will look. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side of the back. So you're going to start with laying everything flat. You're going to take your 3/8 inch overhang, fold it to the wrong side of your suit, and then you're just going to take this one, fold it over, place it on your seam allowance like that, and then you're going to wrap then you're going to wrap your underarm binding over that. Let me put a clip in it, and I'll show you up close. And we're just going to top stitch all of these. So this is what your back will look like. This is tucked inside your binding, and then this will look is what it's going to look like from the right side. You're going to have this loop to be able to put your straps through. So we are going to now just wrap this around and top stitch down, and you're going to do this all the way until, just keep wrapping it over your underarm to enclose the elastic. And then you're going to have this huge strip right here. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can do this strip. So you can get your pins and you can wrap it around the same way that you did the other one. But this is a lot that you're going to have to pin. And an easier way that I found to do it is just to fold it right sides together and serge it really quickly. Just serge or zigzag stitch starting here and then right sides together, and do it like that all the way until you get about 2 inches away from your swimsuit, and then stop your seam there and then just turn it right side out. And that way you're not having to fiddle with like pinning and keeping it all even and keeping it from getting twisted or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead, and before I even start top stitching in that, I'm going to do that. Now, of course, if you don't like my method, you can do it the way it is in the instructions, which is where you just wrap it around and top stitch it down and keep the binding going out that way. Okay, so this is where I'm at. All I did was sew these right sides together along this edge, and then I stopped when I got about 2 inches away from my suit so that I had an opening to turn it right side out through. Now I'm going to take a safety pin, and I'm going to put the safety pin on the end of the strap, and I am like this. And if you have a different strap turner, you can use that. Then I'm going to put the safety pin through, and I'm just turning the strap. And now I'm going to do the same on the other one. So see, now I have these nice straps. And whenever I go to top stitch, so this is where I'll show you where the suit ends. So I'm wrapping this binding over and just doing that. And then I'm going to fold the seam allowance in right here, and I'll just top stitch that close. Do you see that? And I'll do that on the other side. So now I'm going to go top stitch. I'm going to start on this end to make that down. I'll probably just zigzag that with my regular sewing machine so that I can make sure that everything gets enclosed. And then I can use, you can either use your zigzag or a cover stitch and then just go over your underarm binding, making sure to wrap it all the way around. And then after that, we are done with our top straps. I'll show you how to thread them for the suit. And then we'll be able to do our bottom. Now, I love how these straps make the suit so adjustable. I feel like my kids grow so fast, and it just makes it to where they can wear their suit all season and hopefully the next. So anyways, we're getting so close to being done. Yay. So now we are at the point where we have all of our bindings done. So this is what it should look like on the underarm where it meets the front and the back. And now if you want to tie your suit, all you do is bring this up and over and through this loop. You can cross them. I tried that and I didn't really like the look as much. I liked them better just on the same one. So like this, and then you're gonna tie a pretty bow right here. Isn't that pretty?